Hello and welcome to Friendship Focus. Today we have the distinct honor of interviewing Nora Nader, who is a Westland resident, and she's here to tell us today about what life was like in Detroit in the dance world. Nora, tell us your story.
Thank you, Errin. First of all, I was born in the Detroit East Side, and the part that I can't get over is that I have spent most of my life here at Westland, because when I got married and we were going to have children, we wanted to open up an optometric office. And so the corner of where I live, the house that I'm in, is zoned professional office, and I was able to raise my two boys right across from Hines Parkway, and the neighborhood was filled with nothing but a lot of boys. So it was a great place to come to, and it was in the country at that time. You didn't have the Westland Shopping Center, and you didn't have all these homes that came about on the GI mortgage, 5% mortgage, umpteen years ago in '57. But the thing that brought me into your life was our common interest in the dance world. And the dance world for me was almost survival.
Explain what you mean by that, survival.
Because I was what you call a depression baby, and they were very young, my parents, of different backgrounds and different religions. And in the Detroit area at that time, going to school, my father as a pharmacist had a tough time. I actually remember seeing him graduate college from the Detroit Pharmacy. And when I was very young, I was the only child for 10 years, we lived in places where I had to sleep on couches and didn't have my own bed. And I developed at 16 some backaches going to school, and I thought it was from what? Carrying books. And the doctor that was upstairs from my father's pharmacy on Linwood and Tyler said, "Nora, you're going to live a happy, long, healthy life. You've got what they label today as scoliosis," and they called it then sway back, curvature of the spine, bubble butt, whatever the term in that area was popular. And I didn't know why. It was hard to sit all the time. And then with the revelation that I needed to stretch and move. And Errin, and it was in a day and age when girls didn't do that thing. We didn't play baseball or have soccer. We weren't allowed on the tennis courts.
You didn't have the typical athletic activities that
no,
kids are accustomed to.
If you were a dancer, a ballroom dancer, or if you were taking lessons from a studio, you got to do acrobatics, tap, ballet. But my background was not so good. I didn't realize that not only did I have the curvature of the spine, I was very pigeon-toed. So do you remember in the movie Billy Elliot? Mm-hmm. As a boy, he was chosen in England because he had this fabulous turnout that girls today would die for if they were in the jazz and ballet world. Well, it didn't matter in the ballroom world. You had to learn to have your foot straight. You have to toe it in sometimes, and you have to toe it out. So when I wanted to go to art school after high school, there was a big problem. It was called money. They didn't have loans and help for young people.
What year was this about?
I graduated Central in '47, and anyone that knows the Detroit background would know that Roosevelt, Durfee, and Central were three schools right next to each other. I think it was supposed to be the University of Detroit, but Detroit got too big. And so I graduated early, and Dad said I could go to business college, which was terrible for me because I had to sit and I wasn't detail prone. So I double dated with someone who was working for the studio downtown Detroit called Robert Morgan's. It was on Washington Boulevard, not on Washington Boulevard, it was on Woodward, right where the expressway is right now. They tore the building down years ago. But it was within walking distance of J.L. Hudson's, of Grand Circus Park. And the Detroit area downtown was busting with new people coming in after the war and during the war for the automobile industry. And oh my God, downtown was the greatest place in the world to go. J.L. Hudson's was a fabulous store. You had the Crowley's Clock and Curran's. And because of my art background, I worked across the street at a little store called Klein's doing the window displays on the weekend.
What type of window displays?
Clothing.
Clothing.
You know, and they would change it every season, and I could go in on Sundays and do that, because the thing that I brought with the shoes that we were wearing in that day and age, when I got hired in the dance world, we didn't have the selection of affordable shoes. I'm sure movie stars were able to custom have their shoes made, like people like Ann Miller, who did, and Ginger Rogers, who did a lot of dancing of that nature. But our shoes look very much like what's come back for 4 or 5 times.
They look like modern shoes.
It looks like exactly what you'd see in the stores today, except this shoe cost me $85 in the 50s. And the thing that's different than the shoes today is, as a dancer, we would crack our soles. And so this shoe has had about 5 metal shanks put into it. You could not bend like the dance shoes today are, and this would be murder. But the story is that in order to go to art school, I worked for Robert Morgan's, went to art school, then didn't have enough money to continue because that was Wayne University's art school. When I got more money, I went to arts and crafts, and G.I. Joe had just come home from the war. I was one of 3 girls, and those guys were hungry. And I walked around arts and crafts protecting myself. It was a strange day and age, because those boys that went to art school were tremendously talented. And I started to realize that as a girl, I wasn't going to make it in the art world. I didn't have the money for oils and sculpturing. And meanwhile, I fell in love with one of the boys that I was dancing with, my second dance partner. And he was working at this place on Washington Boulevard training with, he said, the greatest trainer he'd ever had in the dance world. And so I got a job working after training school. The training school was from 6 to 10, 5 days a week for about 6 months before they decided whether they would hire you. And this was the Arthur Murray Studios. But what impressed me is that I could go downtown by bus as a teenager and get a job any day of the week. And when I worked for the studios, I would stand at Grand Circus Park in my high heel platforms at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So you work from 1 to 10, and who's ready to go to sleep at 10? So the dancers were all young, excitable. Most of them were absolutely gorgeous. They looked like they walked out of Hollywood studios. And we would date within ourselves. So it was like a world after high school with my own peer group. And we were being trained at Arthur Murray's by this woman called Doris Eaton Travis, which would be a program to consider in the future. She has a fantastic story. But the dance world downtown Detroit was being invaded by the Latinos, and they had the Wonder Bar downstairs from the Arthur Murray studio, the brass rail, the famous door, and these were within walking distance of the bus. So you could go after teaching, you could go and sit down. Nobody drank alcohol because we were very poor customers. All we wanted to do was dance some more.
You just want to carry on.
Yeah, you got your highs. And the Latin world, oh my God, rumba was coming in. And this new dance called fast rumba called mambo. And then one of our teachers' sisters married a man from Cuba, and he came and taught what was called syncopated mambo, which we call today cha-cha-cha. It's like our triple swing.
Right.
And uh, the teachers were as enthusiastic and addicted to the dancing as the students became. A television program started to open up, and new dance studios were opened all over the state of Michigan by my boss, Doris Eaton, because she was the first woman to get a lifetime franchise from Arthur Murray's in the 50s and 40s, when women didn't do that sort of
That's
thing.
an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah. You know, we were okay to be educated with the men, but we were not given the same salary, and we were not given the same business opportunities.
So there was a glass roof or glass ceiling that you constantly had to struggle against, even in the dance world itself.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. Doris's training was unusual, though, because the dancing in the bars were being picked up by her influence. When she was given the franchise, she opened up at the Statler downtown, and they didn't have very good business on certain nights. So she and her dance partner, Cy Andrews, would do little exhibitions of waltz and foxtrot, and the owners of the Statler realized that she was bringing in business, and so consequently they asked for nightly performances. So after the studio closed at 10, she would send teachers over, and they would do little exhibitions, and the downtown studio was starting to develop at the Statler, and they opened up in the 50s over the Wonder Bar, and you could be across the street at Robinson Furniture and at this is the Catholic Church Aloysius that was downtown. I think so. Okay. And we would stand and look up at night, and it was on the second floor, and you would see the sheer curtain with a silhouette of people doing tango or waltz in front of it.
So how did you get involved more into that scene?
The dance world was a substitute for what my doctor had told me when he said, "You have scoliosis." He said, "Nora, you have to move." And I felt that when I was moving, I was feeling better, and I didn't have to worry about being pigeon-toed, because in the dance world, there are so many movements in ballroom where you are toed in, and the feeling good about what you were doing. I loved it, and there was a thing that was happening. The studios were selling dance courses, and people under 21 were not allowed to sign contracts. So I was very interested in young people, and they gave me the privilege of taking these they're teenagers, but they were young adults, and forming classes from them. And the classes had to have a place to go dancing that were supervised. So this new building called the Veterans Memorial on Jefferson opened up. They had 2 ballrooms. I didn't know about the second one because I had left the dance world by the time the second ballroom started. And I wasn't much older than those teenagers, but I was running around with no cars in that day and age. So the people who lived in the downtown area had to trust the bus systems, and they were great. And I was able to take a bus downtown early enough to set up so that these young people could dance on the riverfront view. The building was absolutely gorgeous. The floor was wonderful. And you had ballrooms opening up all over the place because this new thing happened during the war and after the war called the big band era. Right. And you had, I have a list of 15 bands, from the Dorseys to Benny Goodman to Glenn Miller, that did entertainment for the soldiers during the war. But Detroit was featuring this new thing in the country. We had the interest in the Latin, and Doris did not want to teach anything that she didn't understand. So we also had new things called movie cameras, and she sent her brother and his very beautiful dance partner, Jeannie Winters, with a camera crew to the Latin American countries. We already had samba on the books, But when Doris saw the samba being danced and they filmed it in Brazil, it was nothing like the interpretation of this wonderful band called Xavier Cugat with the lady with the bananas in her hat,
Right.
Carmen Miranda.
Carmen Miranda.
They took a very slow, graceful dance, almost as slow as waltz, and they jazzed it up. When Chubby Checker's song came out, I was downstairs in Westland doing my laundry with the television on, and when I saw that dance, I said, uh-oh, they can't touch. And touching was a big part of our ballroom, because how you touch, where you put your hands, what you do with the underarm turns and so forth are things that, like in Dancing with the Stars, they will say you can only do 10% of a part from your partner. But when you didn't hold hands or touch, we called it solo shine. Like what happened is the Latin mambo started off close and then it opened up like the twist, and you did your own little freestyle dancing, and then you would come back to your partner. Well, I tell the story to my ballroom classes that he let her go into shine position in the 50s, and she never came back till after the 80s. Now, people who had ballroom dancing study it and love it and never let it go. There were classes at the YMCA that my first dance partner, Don May, taught, that there were 100 people in those classes at the time when freestyle dancing was the